Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Roberti, and I'm pleased to welcome our next speaker. Lieutenant General A.C. Roper serves as the Deputy Commander of U.S. Northern Command and the Vice Commander of the U.S. element at North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. From his position at Peterson Air Force Base outside of Colorado Springs, General Roper assists the commander of U.S. NORTHCOM and NORAD in anticipating, preparing for, and responding to threats against North America and within Northern Command's assigned area of responsibility. General Roper also provides oversight of Northern Command's mission to provide defense support to civil authorities. General Roper has 35 years of distinguished service in the U.S. Army in active and reserve capacities and has completed several overseas deployments. If you take a look at his bio, it's extremely impressive. I would encourage you to read it. If I were to do it, it would take another 5 minutes. But in addition to his Army service, he also served as a police officer for 33 years and retired in 2017 as chief of the Birmingham Police Department in Birmingham, Alabama. General Roper has been able to apply key lessons learned from his time leading both the Army Reserve and Birmingham Police Department. He led the Army Reserve Command that provides trained and ready units to respond to homeland emergencies and support the American people. A few years ago, when significant tornadoes struck Alabama, then Chief Roper understood the coordination required to synchronize civilian response and recovery efforts, as well as the importance of partnerships and relationships to mission success. General Roper's unique law enforcement perspective is particularly valuable in his position as Deputy Commander at U.S. Northern Command, where support to civil authorities is a key priority. The pandemic, significant natural disasters, and rapid technological changes have changed the North American security environment, and our adversaries have adapted and advanced their capabilities in all domains to challenge us at home. These adversaries are exploiting perceived cyber or societal or social or political vulnerabilities for their benefit and, where possible, are holding at risk our people, our critical infrastructure, and our ability to project power. These facts underscore the command's challenges as it looks to integrate new capabilities, adopt forward-looking approaches, and adjust how it operates to succeed in its mission. Lieutenant General Roper's remarks today will set the stage for the combatant commander's keynote remarks on Homeland Defense tomorrow. I look forward to hearing his perspective on the role the private sector plays in advancing the U.S. Northern Command's Homeland Defense mission and what effective public-private partnerships look like from his point of view. Lieutenant General Roper, welcome and good afternoon. The floor is yours.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and to FEMA for hosting this vitally important conference and allowing me to share my thoughts at this forum. It is my great pleasure to represent North American Aerospace Defense Command and the United States Northern Command today. These commands, while distinct, share a single no-fail mission: defend our homeland. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Space Force Guardians, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians at NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM come to work each day dedicated to this singular mission. But we cannot defend our homeland alone. It takes a collective effort from people like those in attendance today, from our interagency partners at the federal, state, and local levels, and from the private sector. To me, Homeland Defense and Homeland Security are intertwined. You cannot have Homeland Security without hometown security. And that's one thing I've learned from 33 years as a police officer. And as Chris mentioned, a decade as the chief of police in Birmingham, Alabama. It's people like you and the organizations you represent that serve as the first line of our nation's security. But before I go any further, let me quickly paint you a picture of our current strategic environment. We live in an era of great power competition. China's ambition to become a world power has emboldened their military expansion and global influence, both economically and through statecraft. And they view the United States as the principal obstacle standing in the way of their desired end state. Russia strives to reassert itself as a world power and looks to exploit the full spectrum of options, both kinetic and non-kinetic, to achieve its goals. We've seen Russia increasingly leverage asymmetric strategies like meddling in our internal civil affairs to create instability in our own backyard. Additionally, Iran and North Korea continue to advance their ability to target the homeland as a top priority in order to preserve their own regimes. And we must still be vigilant to the threats posed by violent extremist organizations, threats like the one we experienced on 9/11. So how do we accomplish the no-fail mission of defending our homelands from these threats? We need to recognize that today's security environment is not as simple as two military forces trading blows in a war of attrition. Instead, our adversaries will target our homeland through the cyber realm, our infrastructure. They'll look to divide us through social media, sow discord through civil unrest. They will target our very way of life. They'll muddy the waters, try to complicate things within our communities so we're unwilling or unable to fight. So here is the bottom line. We need to acknowledge that the homeland is no longer a sanctuary from our adversaries. You're likely familiar with U.S. Northern Command's Defense Support to Civil Authorities mission, commonly referred to as DSCA. From hurricane response to forest fires and other natural disasters to supporting our nation's COVID-19 response efforts. We consider this mission fundamentally as defending our homeland, not the kind you may picture when you think of the traditional military mission, but just as vital. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack was a great example of malign cyber activity that had major impacts. And you can imagine the potential these types of attacks could have if applied at scale. These kinds of emergencies, whether natural or man-made, they threaten the homeland. And so we look at them with the same degree of urgency that we do with traditional military threats. So the primary message that I like to convey aligns exactly with the purpose of this conference. That is, we have to think about disaster response and recovery through a whole of nation approach. Whether it's a nation state or a natural disaster, threats to our homeland don't concern themselves with lanes of responsibility and the gaps and seams that these create. In fact, those seams are exactly what our adversaries will look to exploit. So I believe it's critically important that the private and public sectors, our military, our federal, state, and local government agencies, and our private and other NGOs strive to synchronize our resiliency efforts through our planning, through our operations, through exercises, our innovative efforts, sharing our lessons learned, and our strategic messaging, that we continue to work those seams that I mentioned and improve the way that our private and public sectors communicate and collaborate. So here's one quick example of what I'm talking about. U.S. NORTHCOM actively participates with the Interagency Coordination Center. And last year during Hurricane Sally, we had a great session and continuing efforts of crosstalk with the American Red Cross with regards to sheltering people displaced from the storm. The ICC enabled the military and the Red Cross to synchronize our efforts instead of duplicating them. A small win, but a great case study in how we can work together to help the American people during crisis. The ability to clearly see the whole playing field during a disaster, like we did during Hurricane Sally, is what we call in the military all domain awareness. And we at NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM consider all domain awareness to be a key strategic principle to defending our homeland. There are challenges to this, obviously. When we look at natural disaster response, just the sheer number of agencies that have responsibilities and equities. It's so easy for information to get stovepiped unless we really work on the processes to prevent it. That's easier to say than to do. Today, we're saturated with data coming from everywhere, from satellites, our airborne sensors, open source feeds, even Twitter and other social media. And this is the challenge that NORAD and U.S. Northern Command face on a daily basis, trying to build that all-domain awareness with our partners. So 2 years ago, we decided to partner with industry to enhance our all-domain awareness capabilities through something we call GIDE, G-I-D-E, which means Global Information Dominance Experiments. We saw how much the private sector was investing in new technologies, particularly involving data, and we wanted to leverage those capabilities and that experience. In many ways, we needed to learn from the private sector to onboard that culture of moving fast when it comes to innovation. When COVID hit us last year, we shifted our GIDE efforts to enhance the military support to medical response operations. Working with our industry partners, we rapidly evolved our domain awareness tools. We think this helped us to provide more timely support to the American people. And we also took some great lessons from the experience. I'm happy to report that we just wrapped up our third iteration of GIDE just a couple of weeks ago. And I had the opportunity to watch this firsthand from our operations center. It was so impressive to see our combined military, interagency, and private industrial teams working side by side, taking massive amounts of data, streaming in from across the globe, and making sense of it with AI, with machine learning algorithms to help our leaders make timely, informed decisions in defense of our homeland. We're already planning our next iteration of GIDE, and I can tell you that the Department of Defense is fully on board with how fast we're moving, particularly with our private sector partners. I bring this up because this is exactly where we can take this same philosophy, how those of us here today can think about all domain awareness and how we can better support the American people by closing those gaps and seams I mentioned and moving fast to get there. We cannot be afraid to fail. In fact, we should expect to fail when we move fast. We should be afraid of moving too slow. So we need to be faster than the threats we face. So whether that threat is a hurricane off the coast of Florida, or wildfire in California, or an adversarial attack on our power grids, supply chains, or banking systems, we can take what we've learned from COVID and other disaster response efforts to learn and adapt. Apply these lessons in our exercises, our combined planning efforts, our collaborative innovation efforts, so we strengthen our nation's resiliency through these partnerships. That's the challenge we've issued ourselves here at NORAD and U.S. Northern Command. And that's also the challenge we have in this very forum, to work together to be ready when crisis comes. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, and thank you for your time. We look forward to working with our interagency partners at FEMA, with DHS, and with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as we continue this no-fail mission of defending our homelands. So on behalf of the men and women at Northern American Aerospace Defense Command, better known as NORAD, and U.S. Northern Command, the bottom line is we have the watch. Thank you so much.